All right. So welcome to the 1000 Amp Podcast. I'm Matt Schell, and I'm joined today by Thomas Reisenegger from Future Friends Games. Hi, Thomas. How are you?
Hello. Thanks for having me. Pretty good as far as 2021 goes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we thought we were going to get a break. We thought the problem was 2020, but apparently
it's not just a number.
It's not just a number. Apparently the calendar flipped over and our problems have not yet gone away. We're still hopeful. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. So rather than me describing what what Future Friends Games does, it's funny. I have a friend who runs a company called Friends of Friends. It's not the same company that we're talking about. Future Friends. How do you guys describe it to folks who are asking?
So we describe it as a promotion agency. We did chat a little bit about that before. Like, it keeps coming up that people think we are a PR agency or say we are a PR agency, and that's often how we market ourselves. But I think what we actually do is more the umbrella term promotion. So what we offer is we do press outreach, we do influencer outreach like YouTube and Twitch.
Yeah.
We do social media consulting, sometimes make social media content. We will make your Steam page, optimize your Switch eShop page. So basically everything to do with like marketing and PR. Our approach is we look at each specific game and being like, how do we make the most out of it for that specific game? Yeah. Because there's always more you can do. There's always another platform. There's always more you could post. And often we work with really small teams. It's like 1 to 10 people.
Yeah.
So it's like if there's 1 or 2 guys working on this, or like that, like what can we do to make their life efficient? But like they still need to finish their game. So it's like they make one video. Can we make a Reddit and Imgur post out of it? Can we make this into a tweet and a newsletter within an hour? Because we don't have a week to spend on this PR beat.
Right.
So that's a lot of what we do.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And I think that it's interesting, something that I was listening to your own excellent podcast, which I encourage everybody to check out. It's very funny, which wasn't what I was expecting, but it was great. And I was chuckling along in the kitchen. And one of the things that you and your co-founder alluded to in your conversation, I think in the first or second episode, was the way all these categories are kind of collapsing together. And for those of us who have been in the business for longer, these used to be very kind of siloed, clear. We're a PR agency. We talk to magazines. We're a social media agency. We do this. And now it's kind of getting more and more mixed. And then obviously in the indie space, right, we're in the kind of smaller business. So we're all swapping hats and changing things around. But I thought that was an interesting thing. And then also that you kind of chose this word promotion as opposed to like saying you're a marketing agency or a PR agency or whatever.
Yeah. And it definitely comes from that, where you said that things just bleed into each other. Like one of the best ways how you get YouTube coverage is being trending on Reddit.
Yeah.
Like obviously, and then follow up with an email to an influencer and be like, look, we're Reddit front page, got 1 million upvotes, I don't know what.
Yeah,
but obviously, as soon as you start just really separating those things, it gets more complicated, and especially for small companies, you also usually can't hire 10 agencies. So gotta really like pick your battles. We look at a lot of like, what do we do, and do we get wish lists out of it? Do we get traffic out of it? Just very focused on getting the most for your money.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think that's very interesting. And I mean, there's a whole lot of places we could take that. But I think that what's interesting for me is looking at your catalog or I don't know what you call it, your roster of games that you've worked with, right? It strikes me as quite curated, for lack of a better term. There are a number of indie games that I've heard of that are either coming out or that have come out. And how are you kind of selective about the clients that you take on, or how do you manage that? And also then just commercially working with all these tiny teams, how does that play out?
So we're definitely very, very picky of what we take on. We're at the moment 5 people. We might be 6 people in a bit, but it's a small team.
Yeah.
And what we do doesn't particularly scale well, so we're probably not going to grow too much. So there's a very limited number of projects we can take on. And there's, I would say, way more people that want to work with us than we can work with. So usually, maybe, I don't know, say one to, like we say definitely more often no than yes if people ask us if we can work with them. Often it's just a timing issue.
Yeah.
But I think as general rule of thumb, like if you make an indie game and you reach out to a PR agency that has nice games on the website, like I think we get a lot of pitches that are just like very, can we just talk, or like don't even say what the game is. I think making sure you already have the right pitch just increases your chances a lot. Like just the key info is to find the right agency and find a partner. I think it's hard to get someone because there's so much demand for PR agencies at the moment that focus on indie games.
That's very interesting, and that's an interesting, as somebody who has worked in marketing for a number of years. There's a little, if you're listening out there and you're trying to start an agency, it sounds like Thomas is saying there's a lot of demand.
Yeah, I would definitely, like I always assumed that, like it's been going for a few years now, and I always thought next year it's going to be the year when everybody starts an agency, and it just doesn't happen. There's like a few new ones popping up, a few ones closing down, but like overall, most of them are just incredibly busy all the time. So I think there's clearly demand, and there's just, I guess because game development is more open and easier. There's just more people making games now.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think also, right, in this space where you have these tiny teams, people wearing a lot of hats of doing art and sound and programming and whatever, that adding, first of all, most people don't get into games because they want to be a marketer or a promoter, right? That's not what people sitting there as a 5-year-old looking at the back of the box dreamed about, right? So I can understand why it's not the first thing that people want to do. But it's, as obviously you know in your work, and I think anybody who is coming from any kind of a business or marketing perspective understands just it's absolutely important. I mean, it may be I think that, and this was also something that was mentioned on your podcast, that at least there was a perception, and I think this was an interesting point, there was a perception of back in 2013 that if you build it, they will come. The kind of Super Meat Boy type stories where just make a really cool game, get on Xbox Live Arcade and become a millionaire, right? A lot of people watched Indie Game the movie, right? And got kind of led down the garden path a little bit. And obviously it's important, right, to always contextualize, hey, think about the moment that you're in, not the moment 7 years ago. But I think that that we're in a moment now where it's probably more important than ever to have a plan for this stuff, at least.
Yeah, I would think so. What I definitely feel a bit is getting more difficult now and over the long run is just like the medium good indie game. I think like the really, really successful ones, they get all the good deals. There's way more stuff that they used to be. They can make way more money. They can make ports and whatnot. And then there's some really small guys that are really lean and just figure out how Steam works, and that kind of works out. But I think like the middle ground where it's like a 5-people team and they make a good game, but it's not the best game ever. I think those games just used to sell better than they did now. So that's definitely difficult. And that's a big part of, I think, also what we do and have conversations with is just looking at the wish list that people already have for their Steam games, and then also talking to them, like, do you have public funding? Do you have money from somewhere else? Like, does your life depend on this? How much do you want to sell? Like, that changes the conversation quite a lot. There's people that work with us and they get government funding from European countries, and they want to have a couple of big articles and a couple of big YouTubers playing it. And obviously, if they can sell, great. But if not, they need that PR portfolio for the next game, for the next application.
Right.
So that's a very different work environment to, we need to sell at least 200,000 copies. Otherwise, I need to sell my house and my kids can't go to school anymore. And that's obviously not projects we love working on, where the stakes are just so high. It's just not a sustainable business often.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And it's an interesting, as an American who lives in Europe, I'm probably more aware of this than a lot. In America, we don't have the concept of arts funding or healthcare or a lot of other things that are kind of exist in the first world. America's kind of, very quickly turning into a third world country. It's a different podcast. But this thing of that some people may be in a cycle where it's really more important to be visible. It's more important to get an article in The Guardian or something. And that if you did, then you could be like, look, institutional press said that this was art and it's important. It's culturally relevant, and give us the money. Yeah, it's but that's a model, right? I think it's important to acknowledge that's a model that's out there that some people are operating inside of. And I think, this is one of my like straw men that I like to poke at, but there's a lot of people operating on models like that are a little bit hidden, right? That,
Yep.
And so you have your average, indie developer who's about to quit their job and go indie, and they're like, well, I saw that so-and-so was able to make their game and release it and survive, and it must be working. And you're like, no, they got, $100,000 from the Swedish government. And it's like, oh,
Definitely.
it's,
I think this is like one of the lesser talked about things, but it's a big thing. And
yeah,
you just approach a project very differently if we need to sell 1,000 copies and that's it, but we should get a few big articles, or we should get an app store feature, not for the money, but to just say like, look, Apple picked this up and a few million people saw it.
yeah.
Because then you can focus on, I don't know, more narrative driven games. If they would come to us and be like, we want to go on Steam, we want to sell, we'd be like, probably not. Like, Steam is very maybe biased or prefers certain types of games and certain genres.
Yeah.
So like us comparing like wish lists and sales numbers all day, every day of loads of games, you get a quite good feeling of games that maybe wouldn't land with media at all, or not even with YouTubers, influencers, but you'd be like, this is going to be a Steam game. If they have a nice Steam page, they're going to sell.
Yeah.
If the game is good. But there's a lot of other games where you look at them and they're lovely, they have an important topic, they maybe are like interesting themes, or like political in an interesting way, but you're like, no matter what happens to this game, they're never going to sell more than a few thousand copies. There's just no demand for that in sales. Maybe in culture, maybe in reading about it, but not just buying power.
No, I think that's interesting. I mean, there was a game a few years ago that people were wringing their hands about, which was That Dragon Cancer, which was I think fits very much into this category. And it's a beautiful game. It's an important game. I backed it on Kickstarter. I got the code. I didn't even play it. I was like, I want this to exist in the world. I love these people. I feel bad for what happened to them. I want this to be a thing. And culturally, it's important, and it's part of the conversation about the range of things that can exist in games. But I actually am not going to sit down on Friday night and play a game about somebody dying of cancer. And and God bless, right? But if you're just here to be expressive and make culturally important artwork, right? That is a goal that's valid, but it's as a commercial prospect, right? It's very risky.
That's it. Like just acknowledging what is commercial and what is art, and also what's hobbyist. Like a lot of our pitches we look at and we're like, it's amazing somebody can make this game alone, but it's a quite nice puzzle platformer. There's too many of them. Unless this is a 12 out of 10 game, it just won't work. Even if it's really good, and I would love to work on it, there's just no too many games like that around.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is it. I think that there's lots and lots we could take, many directions we could take that from. But I think in terms of how you all decide who to work with, and how you all operate as a business, are you doing and answer as much or as little of this as you want to, but are you doing straight fee for services? Are you doing kind of equity back end type deals where the success of the game matters? Or how do you guys kind of structure that commercially?
So I would say 90% of what we do, and that's been over the last few years, the vast majority of business is that you pay per month. That's how most agencies that I know operate. They have a monthly contract or a contract over a few months. Yeah. And during that time, the agency supports you for certain tasks that you agree on before.
Yeah.
And then there's like a really small percent of chance from developers. We've known for ages. We know the games. We want to work longer on that, but we work on a bit of a rev share basis. But that's like really the exception.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's interesting. So, but what's interesting to me there is that, I guess for you all in your business model, it's pretty important. You're trying to back winners because that also makes you all look smart, right? Like,
that's one thing. Like, it makes us look smart. That's good. And I think it has two other factors. We also really look at if we think there's something we can actually help people with. there's devs coming to us, they have an amazing Steam page, they got coverage on all the big sites, and we're like, what do you want? And they were like, more coverage. And we're like, we don't think we can do that. Like, it's amazing what you did, but we can't help anything. So what we look for is people that we think have a chance of succeeding, and where we also see there's an area where they could do more and where the game could have more of an audience.
Right.
And that's kind of a pick. And like, obviously the other big part of that is that we want to work on games that go well, because that's way more fun.
Right.
Yeah,
Just like, and having those sad conversations, like we really tried, but
it's 100 times harder for the developers, and like I really feel for them, because after a project, even if it doesn't go bad, if it goes bad, as an agency, you're just like, oh, I'm really sorry, but like, here's the invoice. Good luck with the next one. But obviously for them, it's really hard, and often you talk for them for a month, you really have your heart in the project, you become friends, and like, yeah, it's a bit heartbreaking if you work on too many projects that don't work out.
Yeah. I mean, that's the human side of it, right? Which is important, right? We're talking about business, but obviously people are doing the business, and you don't want to just be kind of in that situation again and again.
Yeah, that's it. And like, you can never tell for sure, but at least we want to have something where you have a fair shot and you just try your best and then see if it works out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that which is interesting, because I think that a lot of folks who would be on the developer side of the chair might not necessarily be thinking about it from the agency perspective, and might just be thinking, well, I got the money, I put together the money to pay for 3 months or 6 months of retainer, why won't you help me? And I can understand how they, that would be difficult.
Yeah, that's it. And obviously, like, it's incredibly hard to like promote a game that has trouble finding an audience. Right. Like, if I write an amazing tweet for a game that just doesn't work on Twitter, it just doesn't work on Twitter. Yeah. You need to look for another platform or another game. Like, there's only so much you can do.
I think that's an interesting one, and I think it's also, I think this is easy to say, but it's like, maybe if you've got a game and you're trying to take it to marketing agencies and nobody wants to represent it, maybe that's a signal, right, that you should be taking into account and maybe trying to do something different. I don't know if any developer is ever going to be able to really act on that information. I think people just get so bought into their ideas, and they just are going to,
And like, I guess you have to a certain degree just believe in it and go with it. They take ages to make. I understand you can't predict where they're going necessarily always. Yeah. But I think it's a good indicator if you reach out to various agencies a couple of months before and you get a no from all of them and a lot of publishers, that at least they probably don't believe there's a lot of demand for that game.
Yeah.
And obviously agencies and publishers are wrong sometimes.
Of course.
That happens.
Yeah.
It is an indicator, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting, just in terms of kind of signals that you can be looking at, and maybe just try to wrap up development more quickly and start the next one, But I think that, so one thing that I thought was interesting in terms of your positioning as an agency was the idea of, I forget how you put it, whether publishing services, right? And am I understanding that correctly in the thinking that so many people in the indie space are self-publishing, and so you all are kind of coming in with some of the stuff that the publisher might do, but not being a publisher yourselves?
That's 100% it. Yeah, like we go in and be like, we do all your PR marketing stuff, we do business talks, we look for deals, whatnot. But what we usually don't do is put money in, and we don't make the porting, which is what a lot of publishers do. We can help you try to organize money for the porting, but we're not doing it hands-on. And the big thing is like just no upfront investment.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important role of a publisher. I mean, I think this is an interesting one to talk about. Do we feel, what is the relevance of publishers to indies in 2021? Is it, I mean, I know this is kind of a perennial question, right? But I think it's still changing. Is it just to be a bank and give a loan? Is it to do marketing?
That really, I think it depends on your game and what you need and what you want to do. I definitely look at some publisher development deals where I'm like, if they would have gotten that money from anywhere else, they could have maybe done the other services themselves or bought them externally. Yeah. But there's a lot of publishers that are just really good. Often it's about the money. So I think I think publishers can be really good for indie developers, but it can also be really bad. I think it's so case by case.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, right, we're talking about a whole class of business, so it's you can't generalize. But I think I definitely have seen and heard from friends and so on, other developers, these deals where it's like, we're not going to give you any advance. We're going to take 30, 50, take big percentage chunks and do kind of nebulous marketing some hand wave, and you're kind of like, wait a minute,
Yeah, I think that's always like our big advice. Like, obviously we talk to developers, we don't publish anything, but we just work as a service agency, and sometimes they would ask us, like, you work in the industry, do you think this is good? And our big thing is like, just go to the publisher page, look for the last 10 games, look if you like their tweet, did they sell?
Yeah.
Did it look like they have good trailers? Like, did the publisher do their job? It's usually not that hidden.
Yeah. I think that's a really good perspective. I think that there's especially when you're dealing with like a 1, 2, 3 person team, right? There's this just somebody help me kind of feeling, and that somebody just comes in and says like, it's okay, we're going to market your game, it's going to be all right. And they're like, okay, I'm fine.
Definitely. And I think it also like really depends on the team. Like, there's some teams that have people that are just interested, they write perfect tweets, they like PR marketing stuff, they do that anyway. And then the publisher just adds a little bit on top. But there's dev teams where the whole team just hates everything PR and communication. Like, totally fair. Totally. And like, for them, it's like, get a publisher at least to get that base level marketing done.
Yeah.
That makes, that really, I think, depends so much on the team as well.
Yeah. No. I think that's very interesting. And I mean, I think that, but it's something I would encourage anybody in this moment to think about is, if you're talking to some publisher who's offering you a no money down deal or a very low money down deal, right? And they're often kind of nebulous marketing, maybe you don't have access, maybe your game is not getting picked up by marketing agencies, right? But I would at least talk to some marketing agencies and be like, how much does this marketing cost? Like, how much am I giving up for, if I'm giving up 30, 50% of my game, if I had just paid, if the only thing I'm really getting is marketing, if I just paid for that marketing, like,
Yeah. And I guess that's often hard, but like remaining some kind of influence or like have a say in where your marketing budget goes, I think can be very helpful.
Yeah.
It's often probably more annoying for the publisher because they might disagree and then you get them to do other things. But like, it's easy to spend marketing money. It's harder to spend it like on the worthwhile things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's obviously going to be case by case, very different, right? Depending on the game, the genre, the audience, and all that kind of stuff. In terms of, well, there's two ways I want to take this. One is, if somebody is going to work with an agency like yours, what is in the kind of like perfect case scenario where you're like, I love this client, this is great, they're doing everything right. When should they be reaching out? At what stage in development? How far out from release? How early do you want to be in the process? What makes sense?
So like, from our experience, and that again is like with keeping budgets in mind and working with small teams, I think it usually makes sense to start working with an agency. What we really do like it's a month between, like 1 or 2 or 3 months before you announce the game. That's often where we just like have a setup month or a setup period. It's just like getting the Steam page right, getting the game description right, doing key art. Just like, they're things you will need for launch anyway, but if you just do them right at the beginning, you set the right targets, you set the right tone, you actually know what you're aiming for. You set up your Discord in the beginning, you set up your newsletter in the beginning. I think that's something a lot of indie devs miss because they wait too long until it's like a couple of months before launch.
Yeah.
Which is another important period. But I think everything you do throughout your marketing campaign just gets more efficient if you make this beginning right, if you make that beginning count.
That's interesting.
And I think it's a bit of a weird thing that a lot of games press and YouTubers don't consider games announced before there's an official trailer. So what we often see or do is that people, they build their Discord, they tweet about the game. It's kind of half out there, but they've never made this big official, this is the game, first trailer, this is the title, this is what's in it. And that's often kind of good to like start building a community, do stuff early. You already get some interest. You already see what kind of works on Twitter, what kind of works on Discord.
Yeah.
And then you make that really big splash, your first one.
I think that's so. This is definitely something I want to talk about. The balance of open versus closed in terms of early stage communication about the game, right? Something that we've seen, or I feel like there are some indie developers who try to follow the AAA playbook to be like, big reveal, surprise, here's my game, and it's basically done, and it is what it is, and then nobody cares, right? Because nobody was waiting, nobody knew who you were, just it's brutal, but it's just true that nobody was excitedly waiting for. It's not Half-Life 3, right? So, so for me, my thinking about it is that the other extreme is preferable, right? That you're just constantly tweeting about it, or I don't know, constantly, not in an annoying way, right? But just early in the process, you're just being open, sharing, but what's the distinction you make there is interesting. That like probably at that point you're not like reaching out to YouTubers and stuff, obviously, because there's nothing necessarily playable or right. But in terms of like the game dev Twitter scene and maybe YouTube and stuff, that you're really communicating a lot very openly, not holding back any secrets or doing any big reveal.
Yeah, I think that's like, in general, that's a question I think we get a lot. And for me, there's two different categories of games. The one that you said that follow AAA model. I think if you can do that, that's brilliant. But that's only if you've already made a few big games, or if you got some kind of deal, like you're on Applicate, you're on Game Pass, something where you just know you're going to get a lot of exposure, you're probably going to get some money up front, so you don't need to build up that thing, and often you're not allowed to because you're tied to some event or some timeline or whatever.
Yeah.
And then in that case, brilliant, totally fine, just wait, make this perfect trailer, put it out. For like all the people that don't have those opportunities, I think what we usually say, the grind, just posting every week, building up your audience, getting your fans, making sure you get like as many people as you can to just buy on day one and leave reviews. I think that's the real secret to success. You can, a lot of those smaller teams release on Steam, and you can so clearly see on the Steam wishlist count how much you're probably gonna sell.
Yeah.
Where always the count might be off. Like there's formulas how you figure out your sales potential, and those formulas might be off a little bit, but like I don't know how, but they might be off by 100%, but they're not off by 1,000%.
Right.
If you have 500 wishlists before launch, it's just not going to happen. There's just certain things where you just know you need at least reach that threshold.
Yeah. Are you a believer in the whole box slider number idea, that it's like reviews, looking at something, it's like reviews times 40 or 50 or 80, like looking at external data? Do you buy into that?
I think it's a guideline. It doesn't tell you the whole story. I think it depends so much on game type, on what other games are releasing, whatnot. But there's a few counts we like quite a lot. What we always look at of not yet released games is the Steam follower count. That's public. That's a quite clear indication of wishlists.
Interesting. Yeah.
So usually it's just on steamdb.info. You can just look that up. So like all the games we work on or competitors we see, we always check their follower count. It just seems to be quite accurate. At least, like we've seen games where we're like, that game looks weird. Like I don't know if that's gonna go well, and then you look up and they have like thousands of followers, and that means 100,000 of wish lists. And they're like, okay, we're not going to release on the same day as them. That is a really big game that I just didn't know is massive.
Yeah,
because you can't see it from the outside. So I think that is helpful. But again, there's so much luck involved and so many other factors. And for example, on console, it's kind of like black box, like you just don't know.
Yeah, right. You can't get that data. I mean, that's something I think is interesting with, just actually recently I got kind of interested in, and actually sadly he just ended it, but Ryan Clark's Clark Tank show, is phenomenal, totally. Super sad when he did the last episode last week or whatever it was. But the analysis that he's doing, the kind of market research and saying, okay, looking at games in this niche, can we determine, is this overall area commercially viable on Steam? Obviously, talking specifically about Steam, but I think it's probably, again, one of those things that like a lot of people got into game development because they wanted to draw sprites or write code, right? So they're not necessarily really interested in market research. But it is pretty interesting to be able to go and look at things and see, like, this game that I'm working on right now is cute. It's like a cute theme, right? So probably we'll get the cute tag on Steam, hopefully, right? So I'm looking at other things in that category, and I'm looking at this game, Calico, that just came out, this like cat cafe game, right?
Yeah.
Very niche. I think it's super cute and appealing, right? So I'm like, okay, this is kind of in a zone similar. What I'm doing is not quite as pink and so on as what they're doing, but but there's something there. And I'm looking at the number of reviews coming in since a pretty recent release, and I think they had 550 reviews or something already, and I'm like,
yeah,
okay, like that's pretty good. And it's a 2-person team, and actually it's full of bugs and stuff. And interestingly, the audience is like they're kind of like, everybody's saying, yes, there's a lot of bugs, but lots of people are like, but we love it anyway. Which I'm like, amazing. Like, I love this audience. Like, they're so kind. And, I'm like, oh, what a nice audience. So yeah, I wish them well with the game. And it seems like it's going well. That's the kind of thing that you can see. And that I wouldn't have necessarily, I looked at it, I saw it was coming, and I was like, whoa, this is interesting and a little bit wild, off the consensus a little bit. And then you see the reviews come in, you're like, okay.
Yeah, that actually works out, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. There's always outliers, but there's just rough things. Like if you make a tycoon game, it's day and night to making a puzzle platform of what you can expect or how much work you need to put in to make it big.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting. There was a talk actually that Jason Rohrer made at GDC in recent years, a year or two ago, about 1 Hour, One Life, and just the idea of, it's a good talk, and he shares a lot of data and stuff, which was interesting. But the idea that games that are situation generators, that are not this kind of linear content stuff, or puzzle platformers, which are kind of like again, pretty much content-based things, right? Whereas like, I'm a big fan of Factorio, right? And Factorio is one of those games where you're like, just looking at it casually, you would not necessarily think, oh, this is going to be a huge hit. There's a huge audience of super nerdy people who just want to play with conveyor belts, right? Turns out there is. Right. And it's endlessly engaging, like, and just because of the nature of the game, right? You could just play it for hundreds of hours, and that somehow in the Steam landscape is a huge advantage, right? Because people keep playing, and then, I think it's an interest that kind of term of like situation generators, or just that idea of like these very systemic games, right? As opposed to content driven games. I thought was an interesting thought.
Definitely, yeah. Like we often just call, like if we get an email from potential clients, we just look at them and be like, this is a Steam game. Yeah. Like it's just, for us, it's just a term. It's just like Factorio, like you said, it's probably really hard to get press coverage for that game. Like now it's easy because it sold probably a couple of million, but just by the game itself it would be hard. But for the Steam audience or for influencers, those kind of games just...
No, and that's actually a great point. I mean, I think I just literally found it, just somehow populated into my Steam. I don't think I heard about it from YouTube or anything, right? It just populated into my Steam, and then I heard some people at work were a bunch of nerdy programmers at work were playing it, and they were like, they loved it, and it just was like pure organic, algorithmic word of mouth, and just kind of bubbling up. So that's actually an interesting thing to talk about, right? So coming from having been around the business and the ideas of marketing and promotion and so on for a couple of years, the most important thing used to be getting traditional media coverage, right? Magazines, then websites, Now it seems to have kind of moved to YouTubers and streamers, but even that I feel like is almost doesn't matter.
I mean, like how we kind of see them is like they're all important and like should be done on their own rights. Like even I think press coverage was way more important. I still, like, some people are saying like it's completely pointless, just don't outreach. I really disagree with that. I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah.
Like a lot of YouTubers, a lot of people in the social media read gaming websites, and they can start building your audience, and you get awards and a Metacritic score, like helps you a lot on the eShop to sell. Like there's loads of elements where press coverage is really valuable for a game.
Yeah.
The same with influencers, but they're like, yeah, they're not like a one-stop shop solution. Like if one of those avenues are really good, they're probably not going to cut it. The same with influencers. I think they used to translate way more into direct sales than they do now. I think for now, the one thing that we always really recommend, the one thing that can set you apart, the one thing that can always save you if you just have your own community.
Yeah.
If you have your 10,000 people that just buy all your games and leave reviews, like that sorts you out. So that's why often for us is YouTube is great, social media is great, Steam is important. There's a lot of people coming from there. The one core that always keeps you safe forever and will always help you is just building an audience and building a fan base. Can be Discord, can be newsletter, whatever is your platform.
Yeah.
And that is, again, that's coming back to the grind. That usually doesn't happen overnight. That's work. That's why, because you post all the time, every week.
Yeah.
And you just build it up.
Yeah.
But it's always, it's the safest fallback option always. And it boosts all the stuff you do. Like if websites write about your game and people click on it and comment, they check out the numbers. If your fans all go there, they get more traffic. Suddenly it's more interesting.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting. And I think that's definitely something I've, heard from other devs who have had good launches, is that specifically people say build a Discord, that a Discord is, it's the question of newsletter versus Discord, I think is interesting. But that thing of having a core community, it's interesting. You said 10,000 people. I've heard from folks who are like, it can actually be quite a small group as long as there's this kind of core, like you say, who will kind of show up on the article or show up at the place, whatever it is, and wave the flag. And then, whoever's watching will kind of see, oh, there's a tribe around this. There's a movement here, even if it's, it's this kind of it could be a loud minority, but
definitely. Like I think it helps you in a lot of places. Also, like if you have a Discord and you build a community, you need 10 people that talk, that just have a chat, so the others chime in, and it is a place where actually is conversation happening.
Right.
And the other element is, if you manage to get 50 reviews on your first day on a Steam game, like 50 user reviews, that's amazing, and that boosts you up in the algorithm and in the perception of other users big time. Because you just go there and it's like 100% positive, 50 people, that gets you a way better conversion rate than if you wouldn't have it.
Yeah.
And 50 people that doesn't sound much, but it's really hard to get 50 people to buy a game day one and review it if you're a small dev.
Right. I mean, that's like, if you look at the way some people try to do this kind of Boxlighter number math, they say it's between somewhere like reviews times and maybe 40, maybe 80, but so if you think about it that way, if you probably need 2,000 sales to get 50 people to write a review, right? So it's a real small kind of core group out of.
Yeah, and it's like we talk about Steam a lot. I think just because a lot of small devs are there and it's quite transparent in what happens. But like on Steam, the day one is really important because you get a lot of traffic from Steam, and obviously if you have good reviews on day one, you're just going to convert better for like more casual observers.
Right.
And I think I think also like our Steam session definitely comes from that. Just looking at the numbers that Steam gets you in terms of traffic, like you just get a few 100,000 people on your page if you release no matter what.
Yeah.
That's just guaranteed. And if you compare that to press, where a big tier 1 media, Rock, Paper, Shotgun, IGN article gets you like a few thousand people looking at your game, a big YouTuber gets you a few thousand people, a viral post on Reddit, maybe that a few times, but not even close to the 100,000s. That's always like, if you run out of time, if you can only do one thing, just make your Steam page really nice. That's guaranteed traffic that is very high.
That's very interesting. No, I was having a talk with another indie dev who's also a YouTuber, Jonas Tiroler, who's making a game called Will You Snail and doing devlogs and stuff about it. And he said, and this at the time was a little bit counter to my understanding, that he was like, he thought it is still viable to do just that, to literally just make a good game, obviously, but have a good, well-optimized Steam page with good capsule art and a good trailer, and that almost that by itself, you could actually, be commercially viable. I mean, from your perspective, when you say a good Steam, what's a good Steam page?
So I think the really important things that the capsule image, the little image you see in the corner when you go in, that needs to be really nice, because that's also what people see in listings.
Yeah.
It's a new games list, or you get it recommended, and you just see that image. 99% of people that are going to see your game ever, they're only going to see this little image. It's the same on console, like Switch eShop. It's in new releases. So that image better makes clear what your game is, really, really obviously. Because you want to attract all the people that are going to like it, and you want to push all the people away that won't like it.
Right.
Because you don't want to them use up your store traffic and then go in to see the rest of the page and be like, oh, actually, I don't like this.
Right.
So that's really important. And then the trailer, the short description, I think those are the key things. It's just how people, I think, look at Steam pages. They look at that image, read the short text, click through the trailer, scroll a bit up and down, and that's kind of it. Yeah. And at that time, you need to sell.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, coming from doing YouTube, I've learned the importance of thumbnails, right? That it's probably nothing else is more important, right? It's just if you have a good thumbnail, it's like a poster for the movie. It's like the album cover,
And I think often it's like you make this really beautiful page and you make the perfect trailer, and then you just, I still need to make this little weird logo, but I don't care about that so much. It's like, no, this is the one thing you really need to pay attention to.
And probably like spend money on. I mean, one of the things I learned watching Clark Tank is they were like, I forget, it was Chris Zukowski or one of the people in the space who talks about this stuff. I think it was him. And he was like, look, this guy redid his little capsule thumbnail to not use game art and to have like a painted illustration or like a commissioned illustration, right? It was like a dwarf game. And he previously had these kind of slightly low poly looking models, some shot of the game. And then instead he got this like great fantasy dwarf drawing and put that in the capsule art. And that was just like, I forget, it was like a 10x or something crazy. Like it was really, and he did the data, he tracked the data and did a little A/B test, and it was like huge,
Yeah. And I think there's just like nuances to it to like look at imagine you see it on Steam between 20 other games. Like, does it just stand out? Does the color pop? Or like, does it look cool as you look at it straight?
Yeah.
Is it a 4-player co-op game? Maybe put 4 playable characters on it, because otherwise all the single player people are going to click on it and they won't like it. It's just really thinking of a casual observer, because I think it's easy to underestimate how many people there are on Steam that just buy a few indie games, but they're not on Twitter all the time. They don't follow Games Press. They just go in there and look what looks kind of nice.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I do think that, I'm aware myself that, I'm obviously, as a developer myself, I'm on Twitter, I'm paying attention, right? But there are a bunch of games that I do just straight up buy on Steam during the sale, right? And it's funny, I actually bought one of the games that you guys worked on, the Cloud Garden game. Mm-hmm. That was a pure Steam only, saw it on Steam. I was like, I like the art. This looks kind of chill. I'm in a mode of buying chill games because I'm making a chill game, so I'm researching, right? But I bought it, and then I saw it on your roster, and I was like, that was pure Steam only. And it was on sale, it wasn't too expensive, looked cool, and I definitely buy things like that,
I think like our philosophy, what we always do with pretty much everything we put out and recommend and help people with, is our rule 1 is just always keep in mind the philosophy is treat everything you do like people, they've never heard of your game.
Yeah.
Because even games that are big from my point of view or from an indie point of view, they win loads of awards and like sell a lot. There's so many indie people, so many gamer people, so many casual gamer people that have never heard of it, no matter how big your game is.
Yeah.
Like in my Twitter bubble, everybody knows that the console version of Cyberpunk wasn't good, the base version.
Yeah.
If I talk to my friends that play casually, they go like, oh really? I bought an Xbox, I thought it's fine. Like there's a big difference between what my Twitter bubble thinks and what the whole gamer sphere thinks. And I think it's easy to get lost in that. So if you put out a tweet, a trailer, always get to the point straight away and like explain it in a way that somebody understands it that's never seen that game.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good point, and it's easy to feel like oh, everybody inside the little indie, oh, this got 1,000 retweets on Twitter, like it's good, it's everything's great, but obviously there's.
I mean, I think Wildcats is the perfect example. Like that got hundreds of retweets throughout the board, trending on Reddit and Ninja, I think, IGN GameSpot coverage. So if that would be my first game, I would think this game is huge. Everybody knows what that is. If you do it for a few years, there's a lot of indie people that have never heard of it, and they probably will hear about it the first time in 3 years.
Yeah.
That's just so much that it's impossible to keep track of everything.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just, I think, part of the landscape that we're in, right? That it's a crowded and noisy world now, not just inside games, but everywhere, right? Everything is competing for attention right now. Netflix is fighting against Fortnite, and it was really, it's like, it's actually literally just time. We're not even fighting for a sale now. We're just fighting for time for somebody to pay attention to something, which is crazy. There was a talk that the guy from Slime Rancher gave at GDC a while ago, which is phenomenal. And it's kind of depressing, but like he talks about this. He's like, you literally are just competing against you're competing against Twitter, YouTube, Fortnite, everything, just to get somebody. What was interesting about that talk was that the extent to which they had kind of reinvested in Slime Rancher to keep people playing and having people keep playing as actually a mechanism of continuing to sell, which I had not considered, or, it didn't occur to me. I was like, we sold it. We're done.
Yeah, definitely. And like people coming back and whatnot, there's a lot of things to it. And I think in terms of just having short attention spans, or like getting to the point quick, I think like this year, that's definitely where TikTok just like ruined me completely.
Oh yeah, let's talk about TikTok.
Making game TikToks. Like, if we make a trailer now and it doesn't kick off within the first 10 seconds, it's just like, no, absolutely. Like, it needs like, unless you can put, I don't know, a LucasArts logo in the front or a Half-Life logo, it needs to go straight in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's really, really good advice. And it's interesting. One of the things that I learned in all my recent research is also people want to see UI, right? They want to see UI. They want to see gameplay. Like, they don't want to see a little movie. They definitely not build up, definitely not logo, definitely not like artistic, expressive tension building, right? It's like literally show me the UI, show me the buttons, show me the inventory screen. That's going to tell me what kind of game it actually is, right? Which I thought was interesting. And a lot of people will be like, no, turn off the UI in your trailer. Make it look beautiful. It's like, no, actually put the ugly buttons in there because that's,
I think, for me, it's always like, two things is like the first 10 seconds there needs to be something attention grabbing.
Yeah.
If it's CGI mega cutscene, it looks amazing. That's one thing. If it's just really funny, that's another thing.
Yeah.
If it's pure gameplay, that's also fine. But I think that you're right. I think at some point I just want to see gameplay. Yeah. For me, it doesn't have to be straight away, but like somewhere in that video, I just want to see what this game actually is.
Just literal regular gameplay. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's at least a little bit counterintuitive to me, but makes sense. And again, I think it was Chris Zukowski. He was doing user research, recording people clicking around on Steam, and everybody goes to the trailer and starts clicking through the trailer, right? Like, I mean, I do it too. I skip the trailer and go to the screenshots first. I don't even watch the trailer until I've looked at the screenshot and think, because that's the quick way to see. Maybe I like this. Do I want to invest 30 seconds? Do I want to turn the sound on?
Yeah, I think we're big advocates of just putting a lot of work into having nice GIFs on your body text.
Yeah.
So if you scroll down, there's already some gameplay moving.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to hit the play button on the video. It's just there. Like, if you want it or not, you're gonna see some gameplay now.
There it is. Yeah. So let's talk about TikTok, because this is an interesting one for me. TikTok as the new hyped social media platform that is quite different, right? It's got a different feeling and experience than, similar in some ways, but definitely quite different from like Twitter and Instagram. I spent some time looking at it. Maybe it's like a year ago now, when it first started to get hyped up. And there were very few people doing game dev related stuff on it. I actually did some like little experiments of posting some videos and stuff and got some little attention. But the thing that I noticed with it, that I found frustrating is that it doesn't have, and I'm like kind of YouTube biased. Like YouTube is like my favorite platform, but like it doesn't have that effect that YouTube has of things, this long tail and things living and surviving, and you build a catalog of videos and they just get views and you know, kind of you building this base of assets that is going to keep drawing traffic. TikTok, I would get like 300 views on something. I was like, whoa, 300 views in 15 minutes or whatever. I was like, this is great. And then it just was like, that was it, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. But I do think for most people, this is going to be a really good thing in terms of like, we obviously look at all the platforms when they're hot for games and just look, is that realistic for most of our devs to pull off as an avenue?
Yeah.
I think TikTok could be one that could be quite important, like make it in the top platforms for games. I think the main reason for it is, especially YouTube and Instagram, is something that we see a lot of people asking about or trying. What I think is really difficult on those platforms is that they really incentivize with the algorithm regular posting. So on those, you really get more traction if you just post 3 times a week for a year. And that's usually quite steady growth. It's demanding, but it also pays off in the long run. And because it's demanding, there's less people that can pull it off.
Right.
So if that's the thing you want to do and you love YouTube and you all love Instagram, like by all means, go for it because there's less games on there. What's nice about TikTok, I think for more casual indie devs or some that just post here and there, more or less, whenever you put out a post, that post gets shown to like 100, 200 random people.
Yeah.
They just get it on their main feed. And if they like it, if they share it, if they comment, if they follow, that all gets tracked. And then if they like it a lot, it gets pushed. So kind of every post you do could go big or could not go big.
Yes. I think that's a very interesting one in terms of kind of, pulls on the slot machine, right? That it's and TikTok, at least I actually haven't looked at it that recently, but at least when I was looking at it before, the production value is very low, right? It's all, right? It's like...
I mean, talking about, like, I love, like, if you ever look at our website, all our company presentation is purposely, like, a bit crappy looking, like, very MS Paint. I just love that style.
Yeah.
That's very TikTok.
Yes. Very
it's
internet, right? It's very, like, internet
like
native.
But,
Yeah.
But it's way more difficult going to clients, making TikToks or going to people with design backgrounds because they go like, oh, this is wrong. Like the font is really ugly and this starts in the middle of the video. And be like, no, it needs to be that.
Native to the platform. Yeah.
So I think a big part of being good at TikTok is just watching a lot of TikTok.
Right. I mean, like any platform, right? You have to live on the platform to speak in the native language. I mean, I think that, that's a good, that was the thing that I hadn't thought about because I did, being somebody who's interested in this stuff, I researched kind of how the algorithm works and they're like, okay, yeah, it gets shown to this many people. If it basically converts, it'll get another visibility round. And then if it converts in that visibility round, it'll get another. And anything that gets engagement will get pushed and pushed and pushed. And that's how it's got this crazy virality mechanic to it.
And I think like what you mentioned about the long tail, I think there's another version of it. How it kind of works is I think whenever you have a big post, your follower count increases quite a bit. I think it's easier to get followers on TikTok than on other platforms. And once you hit that big post that gets like 100,000 or 1 million views, then all your old videos suddenly get a bump because there's some people going back to it.
Clicking through to the page, going down and watching everything. Yeah.
So like every time you go viral, you see like throughout the page, everything goes up a little bit. But until you go viral next time, things just stagnate and there's not a lot of new traffic.
Yeah, and I think part of that problem was I was taking a YouTube perspective. I think I recorded 10 TikToks or something, and I was kind of thinking, okay, I put 10 assets out there. Let me see over time. And then I realized it just fucking died. And I was like, oh man, I got to do this every day, and that kind of turned me off a little bit. I do still want to re-engage with it. And I want to figure out, at least from my perspective, and also being like a video production person, I'm like, there's got to be a way to make a pipeline for this that is, you can do it effectively and not just be like literally sitting there with your phone all the time. Although maybe that's just the fastest, best way to do it.
That's definitely like different games. We do monitor a lot of games. I think there's maybe, I would say, 10 good indie gaming TikTok accounts at the moment that I know of, so it's not a huge amount. And they all have very different styles. Like some is direct gameplay, some film off the screen. I think there's not one set formula people are keen on.
Yeah.
It's more about finding it. And there's not even, at first I thought it's really important you just post loads.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't really make the difference. It's more like if you post 4 times a day, you have just a better chance of having a big post.
Yeah.
But that's about it. If you just...
you're just getting pulls on the slot machine and you just have more of them.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I would say, like, as tips, if somebody wants to look into it, something I think that's maybe counterintuitive and is something to keep in mind. One is, like, you just need to say what your point is straight away. Like, you've got 1 second. There's so many TikToks that just start with the topic on the thing.
Yeah.
It could be, like, you just write on that it says, this is how I animated the sword in my game.
Right.
They're already there and it stays there, and then you just see how you do it and then you test it. And I think the second metric that's quite important, but it's maybe quite TikTok specific, is that people should watch the whole thing or loop it maybe 2 times. So that's why short things are good, or things that, like, once you stop talking, you cut off. Like in the last scene, cut off. Like no outro, no like lose the sense a little bit.
Because you want it to loop. Yeah. No, I mean, this was the other thing that it's funny because I make a lot of like 12 and 15 minute YouTube videos of me talking, and I record these 90-minute podcasts, like talking a little is not my strong point. And so I was doing, I forget I did, because what is it? It's either 15 seconds or 60 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So I did a couple of 15-second ones, and those did pretty okay. And I was like, oh, let me try this 1 minute thing because then I can actually talk. Then I can actually say something, right? Those did terrible, right? Like nobody wants to watch a minute on a platform full of 15-second clips. So it's a really crazy format to try to author content for. I mean, what do you think? Is it really just like that little, almost like a GIF, like that visual moment of gameplay? Is it talking? Is it jokes or following the trends? Like, what do you think is for indie creators? Is it something to look at?
I think it really, again, depends on the game. I think what is quite hot at the moment, maybe it's because the platform is not saturated yet. Like, really good accounts is Volcanoids and Shotgun Farmers. They're brilliant.
Shotgun Farmers. I know Quasi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's my favorite account. And that's what we also see from other games working. It's just a bit like behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
A TikTok audience is usually a bit younger. And there's just a lot of like 12 to 20-year-old people that like games, think about games.
Yeah.
And they just want to like see a bit behind the scenes. They're like, oh, I know what achievements are, but I never thought that somebody would have to make them. And then you just have a TikTok which is like, I'm just writing my achievements. Like, how many points should I give that one? And then people can comment.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was when I was testing out making content. That was very much what I was doing but I think you have to know it's a younger audience, and they don't want to know about the crazy scriptable object architecture of your game, right? They don't know what that is. It's really just like, hey, I'm making a video game. Like, I'm putting in I'm doing the control scheme, like stuff that is much more digestible to a much less initiated, just much less educated. It's not a game dev audience, really.
We had a conversation internally where we were thinking about doing something for a game where they, I think, changed the hitbox or something.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, we can do how to change. And it's like, no, actually, we should explain what a hitbox is.
Exactly.
You kind of get it when you play video games, but you probably never thought of it really, how that works and what it's called.
Yeah.
So it's just like taking the one step back.
Exactly. Like, we're changing this, but this is what it actually, not assume that people know what it is. I mean, the thing I can say, I got 2 kids and my younger son is just about to turn 12. TikTok is it. It's all he's on. I mean, YouTube, sure, he watches a little bit of Twitch, whatever, but like TikTok, man, like he's on it hard. Like it's like, it's crazy. It's actually, we like fight about it and like, it's intense. He's really, really engaged with TikTok, and so that's one of those things, right, where you kind of have to, for me, I'm 41. I have to like put aside being old and like, try to think about what's coming up, right, and not be fixated on my old person things that I like,
Yeah, I think that's it. And like, I guess when you first hear TikTok, everybody's just like, oh, it's teenagers dancing. Like, I don't want to do that. I think when you start using it, the algorithm, you feel very quickly, the algorithm is really good in picking up what you like, what you don't like. You probably get game dev stuff quite quickly, or you get like something from shows that you grew up with, or something that's funny to you. Like, you need to go for this first hour of teenagers, because that's the standard content that's most clicked on. But then you probably realize quite quickly there's just loads of different pockets and corners of TikTok, and they don't necessarily overlap. Like, I might have a joke, an ongoing joke on my corner of TikTok that's been big for a month that somebody else that is on football TikTok has never heard of. And is never going to see.
Right. Little memes and formats and stuff.
Yeah. And that's, I think, also goes into the posting. Like, if you put a post out, usually the vast majority of people have never seen your account before. Right.
Which is also, that was coming from YouTube as I started to do it. That was super hard for me to let go of. I was like, I did like a 10-part thing that were all like linear. You know, we're not like necessarily linear, but like, I'm like, okay, I talked about, I had made this little endless runner game for my YouTube channel. I was like, let me try making TikToks about this and showing the different parts. But I didn't want to show things twice. I didn't, whereas like nobody was following me. Nobody cared, right? I really should have just been like, a lot less contextual.
Like, I think as an example of a game we work on that had a few viral posts now, half the comments are always, what is the name of the game?
Right, exactly.
Because it's just not in, we didn't put it in the development title, we put it in the hashtags and link it somewhere, but there's a lot of people that just don't see it, what it's called.
Yeah.
And it's that just shows you that's new people.
Yeah, which is great, right? That's, as a marketer, you see that and you're like, oh, that's a hit, right? Somebody's asking, they want to know what the name is. They're ready to, take the next step, which is amazing. Yeah, that's super cool. Well, that's a really good. I'm glad we got a chance to talk about that, because I think that's something that folks may, and actually thinking about it as for indies. I mean, I guess the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is like a little bit of a segue to it, is like just in terms of, I mean, we talked about the idea of, thinking about minimums, right? Thinking about tiny teams, minimums, what are high return things that we can do that are achievable for people with no money and no time, right?
Yeah.
Putting attention and effort into a well-crafted Steam page, that I think is a great, you're going to need a Steam page anyway, right? And that's a great minimum kind of thing to put effort into. What do you think are like some of the achievable? I mean, I think TikTok is interesting, right? Because it's kind of like low budget. Doesn't really matter if it's kind of crappy, It's like
that's it. Yeah, I think that's the nice thing also about TikTok. Like, there's no repercussions if you have 50 posts that don't work. That nobody cares. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like,
they just
don't
disappear.
go back, delete them. They just sit there and do nothing. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, they're not gonna like hurt you. Yeah.
Yeah. But it does take a lot of time. That's the thing. Like, if you just hate TikTok or you don't want to make video content, just look for something else. Like, it needs to be something you want to do.
Yeah. Totally.
I think store pages is my number one. If you can just do one thing, make sure that works. Like, trying to getting any kind of first party support is something that doesn't take a lot of time and can make the biggest difference. If for some reason Nintendo picks you up for an event showcase, if you go to PlayStation, you have a PlayStation game and you say, hey, can we be on the PlayStation blog? They maybe let you write an article that has a massive reach, that get translated into loads of languages. A lot of press is going to pick that up. They put it on their socials. The same as the Xbox Wire blog post. And often it's just, they just need head-ups time or just need to know that's happening.
Yeah.
So I think those are really key. If definitely always try, depends on your game, how long you've been in the industry, but try to get like first-party deals or platform deals. Even if it's unlikely to happen, like try to talk to Epic, try to talk to Stadia. If that happens, you sell to one person and you're good. That's way easier than to sell to a few thousand people.
Right.
And the other thing is like a really nice trailer, I think helps a lot. Like, nice trailer is going to be, you can make GIFs out of that. That is going to be front and center of your store page. Right. That's something YouTubers will look at. That's something press people will look at. So if you have like a really small budget, I would be like, let's make the Steam page nice and make one nice trailer. That's like the bare minimum to give you a good shot, I think.
I think that's a really good kind of checklist there. And like you say, besides kind of reaching out to first parties, it's like you need the trailer anyway for the Steam page, right? You need to make some kind of a Steam page, so you might as well invest in making that good. And then anything that you do with like additional marketing pushes or content is kind of is obviously good, but additional stuff. I mean, in terms of, I think that the platform side is an interesting one. I think the thing that's weird about that and hard for people to think about is how fast that landscape is always changing. And
yes.
right.
Yeah.
And, I remember talking to I don't think he'll mind me sharing this. I was talking to Willie Cheer from Manifold Garden, and, that game was in production for, I forget, 6 years, a long production cycle, right? That he was very open with, documenting the whole time. And then basically, right at the end of the production cycle, he went out and made platform deals, right? And those ended up being good for him with Epic and Microsoft, I think. And that's so weird because it's like you're in production for a long time. You have no idea what the platform landscape is going to be. I mean, do you have any advice around that, or is there any kind of strategy there, or is it just kind of like wait and see?
I think a lot of wait and see. Like, obviously look at what the different platforms have and what kind of games they offer. I think tells you a lot of what they probably will look for. But I think otherwise just trying to reach out and trying to get connections. You just also don't know how they switch gears. Like, you just don't, like, I don't know, maybe Sony next year is like, we want to have all the PlayStation 5 indie exclusive games and put out loads of money. I have no idea. That might happen. It might never happen. Yeah. But that's often where it comes to like right time, right place. And it's just worth it. That's like 10 emails that could make a big difference for you.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that is a thing that if you've been around, even just as a player watching the business for a while, you see, everybody's rushing towards Switch at one point. A couple people get hits on Switch being in the early window. Everybody rushes in there. Now it's kind of crushed and saturated, right? Doesn't mean people can't do well there, but it's a much more crowded area. There was a moment where a bunch of people were making deals on Stadia. I don't know where that is now. It's a little bit hazy, right? Apple Arcade was giving out money for a while, and Epic obviously was giving out money. And these are Epic didn't exist. Apple Arcade didn't exist. There was no way you were going to predict that. But I guess the only lesson is just know that there are. I mean, I guess the positive there is that there does seem to be, I think we were talking before we started recording about whether we're going to go into a streaming world with games, like what happened in the music business and Spotify, which in my mind was a disaster for the labels anyway. But whether things like Stadia, Game Pass, and these kind of bundled PS Now, all these kind of things, these bundled services. On one hand, it's a little scary as an indie dev, right? Because you're thinking everybody's going to be inundated with free games to play. Why are they going to buy yours? On the other hand, you do see the platform holders now need content to sell their subscription, right? So I don't know how that kind of balances. But then they're pretty much always going to need new content, right? It's not like they can buy 20 games this year and then not buy anything next year, right? So
definitely. I mean, if you look at shows and films, I'm not sure if all the film studios and companies are happy about Netflix, but they do finance a lot of exclusive content.
Yeah.
So there's definitely like a certain part of the industry that's probably quite happy about it.
Yeah. No, that's true. And there was actually a moment where everybody was mad at Netflix because they were paying too much money. They were coming in and buying up all these documentaries and stuff and giving them millions of dollars, and all the like regular distributors were like, guys, you're ruining the market. Like, we were paying nothing for these things before. And now, like, so, yeah, that's an interesting one. I think that, it's like everything, right? As 2020 and now 2021 have taught us, right? That's we're living in a chaotic system, right? And you just have no idea.
That's it. I guess that's with the whole advice where you said Switch was really good for indies and now it's more difficult. And now everybody started doing like really crazy discounts. But then with those discounts selling really well, by the time somebody watches this in 3 months, this might be totally over. But like at the moment it works well. I think it's just important to keep an eye on it, what's cool at the moment, because it changes really fast.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Well, I know we've chewed up a lot of your time, and I really appreciate your taking the time to be here. For folks who want to find out more about you and your company, where should they look? Follow you on TikTok.
Yes, please. I need more followers. I make non-gaming content on TikTok, so probably don't follow me there. I think futurefriendsgames.com is our website where we have lots of talks, PR podcasts. So also if you want to have free advice, there's a lot of on there. We've got a Discord template on there if you want to set up your own gaming Discord. It just has all the basic channels, saves a lot of time. So we hope to put some helpful things on there. And otherwise on Twitter under @Olimer.
Amazing.
That's why I tweet a lot of things. Also a few PR tips.
Great. Yeah, and I can definitely co-sign the podcast. It's great and thoughtful. I was listening, doing some research before we met, and learned a lot. So I encourage folks to check that out. You can find it on the podcast directories and stuff. Well, cool, Thomas. So thank you so much for taking the time, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right. Bye.
Cool. Have a good one.